Welcome to a short podcast explaining how to do the practice problem as far as adjusting entries, to review when we would make adjusting entries and how to make them. The information that you were given is in this spreadsheet. We gave you a trial balance, an unadjusted trial balance as of 12/31/2017. These accounts, these amounts, and then I have simply put them in the normal balance with the debits on the left and the credits on the right for each account. So cash is on the debit side and so forth, so that we make sure that we start with a trial balance of balances, and as you can see, it's 840,213 and 840,213 debits and credits. So there's where the normal balance should go for each one of those accounts. Now, one of the things that is a little difficult in real life with adjusting entries is recognizing when you need to make them. Here in classroom, we generally are told, don't make certain adjusting entries. But in real life, nobody comes to tell you that. You have to look at your trial balance and decide which accounts most likely are going to need to be adjusted. And I'll just tell you that when you see prepaid insurance, supplies, note payable would indicate there's interest, salaries, any of those, depreciation may be a situation where you may need an adjusting entry at the end of the year or the end of the accounting period. So we need to be more proactive than we generally are in terms of determining that ourselves in real life. But we gave you some information to help you along your way, and like we anticipated, there's some information about supplies. So we took a physical count on December 31st, 2017. We found 1,360 were on hand. Now, if we go to our trial balance, there's only 710 listed. So what's been happening when you see that is that when they bought supplies, they were just debiting directly to supplies expense rather than debiting supplies. That's the only way that your supplies listed on your trial balance could be lower than what you have on hand. They can't multiply and get bigger. They must have been recording the purchases in supplies expense. Well, some of those that were recorded as supplies expense have not been used yet, and so we need to move them back to the asset. So sometimes that's considered backwards, but a lot of companies do that. They back it out of the expense as an adjusting entry back into the asset. So we want our asset to go up from 710, which is what we have listed, to 1360, which is what we physically counted. And so we need a debit here, and I've done my adjusting entries in two columns in this worksheet. 650 debit to supplies and credit supplies expense. So we used less than we had been recording through the year. And so that's going to reduce our expense. So that's our first adjusting entry from our information. The next adjusting entry information we have is the insurance policy. And again, as we anticipated, we had prepaid insurance, or even if you had just had insurance expense, there is almost always an adjusting entry that needs to be made. So this insurance policy was paid for 24 months on 2/17 for $56.38. That sounds like you've got more in should have more in prepaid than you do. Right now you have 363. Therefore, what must have happened is this 56.38 must have been recorded as an expense rather than as a prepaid. So what we need to do, you can either figure out how much should be an expense or how much should be a prepaid. I generally choose to figure out how much should be the prepaid. So at the end of December, a policy you bought on February 1 should have used 11 months and you should have 13 months left. So you take 5638, you divide it by 24, and you multiply it by 13, and round up to 3054 is what your asset should be. And like we said, our asset is 363, so we need to debit prepaid insurance and credit insurance expense $26.91, and that will bring our asset to what it should be, and reduce our expense to only indicate the part that we have used during the year. The last payment on the note payable was made on December 2nd, and the interest rate on the loan was 4%. So as we anticipated, there's interest on any loan payable or note payable. Here's our note payable amount here, $30,980. So we're going to calculate interest on that. For the year, it would be 4%, and we have last paid on 12/2. You could go with 30 days, but I would be okay with dividing that by 12 to get 1 month's worth of interest, which is what you actually owe, even though you could quabble over days, and that's fine. That's not a problem. But we get 103, and we're going to again round off and debit interest expense and credit interest payable for that $103 there in our adjusting entry columns. Last one is rent for 2018 was paid on December 31st for $360, recorded as expense, rent expense, and so because there should be a prepaid rent, and we see that there is none. Okay, so this is a situation where your rent expense probably looked a little higher than it should be, because it should be 12 times whatever your rent expense is per month, and maybe you had it a little too high when you looked at it, and so that was what told you needed this adjustment. You did some research, you found out that you'd made this extra payment a little early, didn't want to make sure it was done before you maybe left for out of town or something, and so you made this payment. And so we move it from rent expense credit and put it in prepaid rent. So those are the adjusting entries we have completed. You see the debits equal to credits for our total. And then we do an adjusted trial balance. It is one step. You can skip this step if you're fairly confident. But this just simply adjusts for whatever the adjusting entries we made. So only the accounts that had an effect by the entries are changed. Everything else comes across the same. And then we create our balance sheet. Well, we should start with the income statement. Let's move our pane over here a little bit so we can see this a little better. Should start with the income statement. Here's what it should look like. Then the statement of equity, where you change capital stock, no change, retained earnings. You had the net income, new net income. The subtractions were the dividends from the trial balance, and then your balance sheet, which balances with your new adjusted balances. So that is your process of adjusting entries. Hopefully that was review from things you've currently used in the past, but a refresher to make sure that we're comfortable with this process at this stage. These adjusting entries were a lot of what we would call backward ones, taking it from the expense back into the asset or back into the liability, because that often happens, although that's usually not how we were taught in earlier accounting classes.